What if the career path you thought was yours wasn't? What if a single moment, a shift in energy, completely changed everything you knew about yourself? Today's guest, Bronwyn Coles, a leader, visionary, and someone who has lived not just one, but two extraordinary lives. From breaking barriers as the first female director of a major architectural firm to embracing a calling that defies logic and tradition. Her journey is nothing short of mind-blowing. In this episode, Bronwyn shares the moment that shattered her corporate reality and led her into a world of intuition, energy, and leadership like you have never heard before. She reveals how she integrates spirituality with business, navigates the masculine-driven corporate world while staying deeply rooted in her own power, and why the shifts we're experiencing right now, especially in 2025, are bigger than what we can even comprehend. By the end of this conversation, you have a whole new perspective on leadership, energy, and what it truly means to step into your purpose. Welcome to Unleashed and Empowered, the podcast for visionaries and hard-led entrepreneurs who refuse to shrink or settle. I'm Alice Taugs, your host, guide, and fellow traveler in the messy but magical journey of entrepreneurship, blending spirituality, energy, intuition, and AI to amplify aligned business and personal power. Through raw conversations, both solo and with inspiring guests, we explore the moments that change everything, helping you trust yourself, redefine success, and create with courage and ease. You are exactly where you're meant to be. Let's dive in. Welcome to another episode of the Unleashed and Empowered podcast. And I could not be more excited to have Bronwyn on our episode today. You're going to hear so much about Bronwyn, but Bronwyn is amazing. We have met each other just probably over 4 months ago. And Bronwyn, you were immediately called to join Business by Design, which is my group coaching program. And we kind of worked together over that 12-week period where I had the pleasure to get to know you really well. You've got quite a history in the corporate world, but then I almost want to say that you also have a second life that exists outside of corporate, which is equally as exciting. And I know that there's a few things in store for you for 2025 that I'm very excited about. So welcome to today's podcast, and it's so great to have you on.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Absolute pleasure. Now, Bronwyn, I always would like to start all of my podcasts with a little bit of a story around where did you come from? What did you do all your life? And then how did you get here? And what I'm also really interested in is some of the things that had to happen behind the scenes, because we obviously live in a world where, you know, everyone sees the glorified versions of what's happening in businesses, but nobody sees what has to happen behind the scenes in order to get you to where you are today. So feel free to share as little or as much as you like.
So I guess I have had a very varied past, quite a few different types of roles and in different industries. So my original training was in design. So I worked in architecture. I have a design degree, not an architecture degree, but I worked in architecture for many years and absolutely loved it, and found no matter which organisation I worked with, I was always put into leadership positions very quickly. And often, you know, really well in advance of when I was really ready. So, you know, it was a lot of learning on the hop. So definitely initiation by fire in terms of leadership. And so I've really been doing that my whole working life pretty much. So that was the sort of foundation for business, I suppose. And I was put into a leadership role, like I said, very early, particularly in one organisation, and I was in my sort of mid-20s, and circumstances just unfolded that meant that I happened to be right place, right time, and so that opportunity was offered to me. So that was the first big shift, where I had had other leadership roles in other organisations previously, but that one was significant because I was the first woman to be put into a directorship role. It was a large organisation. I was well and truly probably not equipped, quite honestly, to really hold that space, but someone saw something in me that meant that I was offered that position. So that was a massive opportunity for me in terms of my learning and my growth. And I was lucky enough to work with some amazing clients that were, heads of their professions in banking, in retail, in real estate, or whatever it was. So, and they were often large corporations, big state banks, and often government and commercial clients that covered the world. So I designed projects that were international, along with local projects. So that was all fabulous, and I was really enjoying that. And then I had a massive shift, a massive energetic opportunity that came to me. And so that was really quite significant because it fundamentally changed the course of my working life. I had an experience where I had this amazing energy drop into my body following some circumstances that came up. And I was trying to clear those circumstances, those personal circumstances. And in doing that, I had gone to different people, different organisations to try and find solutions, whether they be, psychologists, whether they be kinesiologists. I ended up with a spiritual healer. And she gave me a particular ritual to go through that was quite amazing, and it felt very witchy for me. So it felt really a bit uncomfortable. I wasn't quite sure of whether to do it or not, but I trusted that I'd been guided to this place, and I went ahead with this ritual. It wasn't anything, bloodthirsty. It was simply burning incense and candles and invoking certain energies into the space. And at the end of that journey, there was a very significant moment where this energy landed in my body, and I knew it landed in my body, and I knew it came in for a particular person. And when it came in, I kept getting the message that I had to give this energy to them. And so I didn't know this person very well, and it meant that it was a little bit challenging for me because I was meant to see them the following day, but I didn't end up getting a chance to see them as luck should have it. But that energy just kept running through my body. I kept getting this message over and over and over again that I had to pass this energy on. Little did I know at the time that this woman was experiencing some really significant things in her life, and that energy was being sent to her to support her. So it had also come in to support me and help me clear some childhood trauma stuff. And I was really on a bit of a mission to kind of do that and sort out my life, if you want, And I'd reached that threshold that, I think I was 29 at the time. And, people talk about the Saturn return. It's a time that, there's often significant change in people's lives. So they get married, they have babies, they get divorced, there's often significant things. So I had all these things sort of coming together. And as this energy dropped in, I just knew in that moment it was what I was meant to do. I just knew it. And it meant that it challenged everything that I'd known before. I typically operated on my intellect and on my boldness, I guess, at sort of moving forward in the world. And then here I was being shown something that I had really never encountered before. And so it meant that I had to go on a journey of working out what this was. And as the days went on, the message got louder and louder, the information got more and more, and I began to work with that energy and ultimately became very good friends with the woman that energy was intended for. And I still see her these days. So she knows the story, but it took many years for me to be able to tell her because she wasn't close to me at the time. And I really had to wait until she knew me a bit better to be able to share this journey that I'd been on. So I took out an ad in the local paper and said, I do this energy work, this spiritual healing. It was known as spiritual healing in those days. and most people would have thought it was completely out there, and there would have been a lot of skepticism around it. But anyway, I put out an ad saying that's what I did because it was my commitment to the universe that I was going to honour this energy that I'd been given. And it wasn't about me necessarily bringing clients to me. It was about honouring that energy. So I did that in parallel to my corporate job, and I continued both hand in hand for 5 months until I knew it was time to leave. And so I then quit corporate land, which was a bit of a big gig because, there were not many women in the role that I was in, and I was the first female director of the largest architectural practice at the time in, the biggest city in Australia. So it was a really big thing to walk away from that, And so when I did that, I chose very consciously to embody that energy that I had been gifted. And I knew that there was a purpose, and I knew that it was part of my life path. And so I had to then unfold it. It took me on journeys overseas. It took me on journeys to the desert. It took me, all over the place. And I learned a lot about the land and about people and about energies from those that I encountered, both in physical and in spirit. So as I did more and more of that, I did hundreds and hundreds of hours of meditation where I was downloading various information. And that all was interwoven with the things that I did as I sort of traversed, continents and did whatever I did. And ultimately, when I came back to my hometown, when it was by the time I did that cycle, it was probably, I don't know, a few years. And then by the time I came back to my hometown, I was really a very different person in a lot of ways. And, I then went on to have children, and I did my energy work in parallel to having a family. And then I somehow got swept back into, more of a business environment, which just was completely bizarre because it came through, a family that went to the same school as my children. And it was not me going out seeking it, but somehow they didn't even know me. They offered me a gig. They'd heard that I'd done interior design before. I was at that point working with kids with special needs and really enjoying that work and doing my energy work. I was teaching yoga, I was teaching meditation. But this family somehow saw something in me and invited me to do this work, which led me on a completely different path again into aviation. And so then I sort of segued a couple of times. So it took me into avionics, and then it took me into, aircraft maintenance, and then it took me into quality and safety. And you go, how is this person doing this? She's got all this, esoteric side, and then there's all this really seriously mainstream. And quality and safety is very constrained, particularly in aviation. And so it was really interesting trying to balance that within myself, because there's this constant yearning to do this intuitive work that I know I'm here to do, and to anchor the energies that I know I'm here to anchor. So I ran that in parallel. I'd see people after hours. I did that as well as raising my kids. And then it got to a point where, almost as though I knew there was going to be a fracturing if I didn't actually honor and pull that back in more strongly. And it has been my intention for a long time to allow that integration. And I made a very conscious decision that I needed to work with leaders, because the leaders that are already on their energetic journey of expansion and they're trying to bring people with them, they need the support, they need the energetic framework to do that. They need skills and tools, many of which I've learned over the years, because obviously as I've done my journey back into more mainstream business, I've had to really call on a lot of my energy teachings to be able to manage that, because I'm naturally very sensitive. It's difficult for me to be in an environment where people bombard you energetically. You're often dealing with multiple requirements. So you're having to balance all these different aspects. And as you do that, you have to really monitor and manage your own energy if you're an energy worker, because otherwise you go down a very heavy path and heavy energetically. And that's not what I wanted. And whilst there's certainly been times I've dropped into that as I've gone through that journey, I'll pull myself back out of it. And, there might be other times I drop into it again, I pull myself back out of it. And every time you do that, you learn more skills. And so over the years, I've refined and refined and refined that. And I knew there was always going to come a time where there was going to be a shift back the other way. And I thought it would be complete. I thought it would be completely shifting me back into my intuitive, spiritual aspect. And I thought I'd walk away from the business aspect. But that's not it. I am actually meant to be integrating them. It's just took me a really long time to see it. And so for the last few years, there's been a very conscious decision in my journey to bring the work I do to people who are in leadership, so that they can not only be okay in themselves, but they can actually expand even further. They can anchor more deeply so that they can manifest what they want to manifest, but also do it in a way that doesn't burn them out. And for me, it brings great joy when I work with people that I know have this incredible capacity to leverage humanity and leverage their business and leverage the people that work with them and for them, and to be in the background helping elevate that, so that they can feel good as they do it. But there's a much bigger picture. It's not just them. It's everyone around them. It's all of the good work they can do. Some of them are in not-for-profit spaces. There's other entrepreneurs. There's, people that often work with large groups, large organizations, and carry large responsibility. And that is really what I see as an amazing opportunity for the planet, because then you can really leverage everybody. If you can elevate the leaders, you can elevate the community. If you elevate the community, you elevate the way we deal with the world. It becomes a global energy shift.
Yeah. Wow, there's so much that I want to unpack just in those couple of minutes that you've shared with us. So thank you for diving so deep into your personal story. Obviously, for those that are new to human design, obviously, I'm very passionate about human design. I'm passionate about combining human design with business, and you're a projector. I mean, there is no surprises there. When you talk about, needing to protect your energy, as a projector, you obviously have a very limited battery and capacity, but an incredibly powerful one that then needs to be balanced with rest and rejuvenation so that you don't burn yourself out in the process of being in the three-dimensional in the corporate world. And one of the things with the corporate world that I have found personally, because that's obviously my background as well, I was 21 years in, massive pharmaceutical and medical device companies that were doing their work globally. It is very difficult to maintain the energetic balance to continue to stay in your feminine when you are in such a high leadership role in corporate. Because from my experience, the majority of the time we're experiencing female leaders with a lot of masculine energy.
Yeah.
How did you balance that, and how did you navigate that for yourself?
That's really interesting. I think it's definitely been a journey, and I have to say it was not categorically one thing. I think over time, I specifically chose different people to work with who operated on a softer energetic. So the industries I worked in were particularly male dominated, particularly aviation and architecture. They're both male dominated. The creative side of architecture, often there was more drama. Even the men in it could be more sensitive, but there was often more drama, and they could be a lot more power struggles in that environment. Aviation I found a lot more masculine. There's a lot of engineers in it. Often their sensitivity to emotional responses was not necessarily as sensitive as some other environments. So often it was quite harsh. But I found that I gravitated to companies that were run by people that had a more sensitive masculine energy. That has pros and cons to it, because sometimes they have not been great decision makers or stressed by making decisions because they're not as strong in their masculine. But at the same time, that degree of sensitivity that they had meant I had more bandwidth to play. And that was really, really important for me. And I don't think I could have stayed in that industry had I not been drawn to an organisation and them drawn to me that gave me the bandwidth to play out my desire for love and kindness in that environment. And there have been times, I will absolutely say categorically, well, I've been surrounded by bullying and, very uncomfortable masculine aggression. But I also had to learn to overcome that, because part of the challenge for me was really finding my voice. There was some of the issues that arose from my childhood were that I was very good at speaking my mind and speaking up and being in a public environment and holding my own, as long as I was not overtly challenged by aggressive masculine energy. As soon as I would often be buffeted, and I would do everything to avoid it. So I really had to work on boundaries, and it's quite a significant thing for someone who is energetically sensitive. And I would say that has been a growing journey, and it's taken probably the raising of my kids. I've got 3 kids, and they're all young adults. Well, they're adults now. They're not even young adults. They're adults. And it was taking them through teenagehood that probably started the really strong journey of setting boundaries. And then coupled with working in aviation, that meant that I really had to learn to stand my ground, and particularly over recent years. And because the more senior you become and the more responsibility you have, the more threatened some people are, and the more sensitive you are, the more flowing you are, the more feminine you may be in those environments, the more they'll want to shift you out if they don't like that. And so learning those boundaries was so, so, so important. And the art of saying no, and really understanding what no meant, and holding steady to your no, so that I could be quite clear why I was saying no, and not saying no with aggression and having to have an argument about it and being all emotional about it, but just no, just no, and that has been a significant turning point, because once the people around me started to realize I was serious about that no, instead of being a flexi babe, because that's what I could do, I have a whole bunch of skills and I can morph around people and I can make it work, which I did for, decades. If I continue to do that, the people that need to learn to stand in their own power don't learn it. And it's a really important part of leadership. And it's a really important part that I feel I have to teach others, because often their decisions are made on whatever they feel is appropriate at the time, which I have no issue with. But then they may not be willing to hear other people's voices in that. And particularly if there's a voice that disagrees with them. And so we should all be able to have discussions that don't necessarily align and find a commonality and a way to move forward. But to do it by bullying or blocking or shutting someone down is not the way. And so for me to hold that space of feminine energy in those environments, I had to learn how to say no. I had to learn how to say, I'm not doing that. I had to learn how to say, this is my truth and I'm sticking with it no matter what. And this is what is integrity for me, whatever the context was, and be quite clear that no matter how much bullying or how much pressure was applied, I was not going to roll over. And that, whilst in itself may be seen as, some people may see it as being harsh, but I don't feel harsh when I say that. When I say that no, it is just clear. And so the difference between saying no when you're disgruntled, which is out of alignment, really, if you're disgruntled, you're out of alignment. Yeah. Saying no when you're angry, you're out of alignment. Saying no when you're not really convinced, you're out of alignment. Saying no when you're in alignment is energetically so grounding and so empowering. And there is not the same argument. If they don't want to have it, they'll just avoid you or go away or do it some other way, but they won't tackle you on it in the same way, because the essence of that integrity is so embodied in your energy system that it's not a game. It's not the game of politics doesn't come into it. It just becomes an understanding.
Obviously, with you as a projector and with you being so in tune with energies, you can obviously read situations and boardrooms and intentions so quickly. Yeah. How has that helped you in your corporate career?
Yeah, I'd have to say it didn't in the early days at all, because often people would misunderstand what I was trying to communicate, and they would see it as an undermining or they just didn't want to listen or whatever. But eventually I worked with a couple of men who had their own, I worked in their businesses, and the ones that kind of started to see the gift that I brought would trust the intuition of mine, and they would allow me to guide certain situations. And that was probably the most rewarding environment in a corporate environment, because they trusted me. I knew that they trusted me. I knew I could stretch myself in terms of bringing that intuition to the fore. I could steer a conversation or a dialogue in a meeting to achieve an outcome. I could bring something to the surface that I knew was there that no one was articulating. Mm-hmm. So for me, that was really fabulous. When I moved into a different environment, so still in the same company, the one I'm thinking of at the moment, still in the same company, but that sense of trust wasn't there. I found that I had to sort of go back. It almost felt like going backwards in time, where I was back in that environment where people didn't want to listen, didn't want to hear. And I got frustrated for a while because I got so used to being able to use the gift I have, and I had to learn that I had to let it go. I just had to let it go. And that was probably the toughest thing, because I'd had such an influence on helping this organization grow that to actually step back and watch it falter when it didn't need to falter, I found very, very difficult. But there's also a time and a place. And the reality is they didn't want to hear. And so what I initially did as a projector, of course, is trying to get everybody to hear what I have to say and then getting frustrated about it. But the reality is you've just got to offer it up and let it go. And so I learned the art of that, and in a more conscious way, you know. So it meant that, and probably the work that we've done together has really cemented that for me. And so now I don't ever try and push beyond the first offering. And whereas in days gone by, I would have, you know, which means you shift out of your natural alignment and out of your feminine energy into a more masculine energy, which masculine energy is fine in terms of decision making and in driving something forward, but it's not fine if it's generating a shift in my internal alignment. And so now that I don't do that, the information I provide is still there, but it's meant they've had to come ask for it if they want it.
Yeah.
I've offered it. If they don't take it and it all goes to hell in a handbag, they have to accept it and wear it. And I focus on what I can have control over and what I can do. And it's been quite liberating. I still think there's refinement there for me in terms of when I'm really hard up against it, when people are aggressive, but I'm really so much better. And I don't, if someone was really pushing me now, I'm pretty good. I feel quite comfortable that I can actually hold my own and just be confident in my no, or confident enough if I wasn't sure to say, I'm not sure, and also more confident in my vulnerability. Because I'd been in such aggressive environments previously, you know, often I didn't show my vulnerability. And that is also a hangover from, you know, being vulnerable as a child and not being able to protect myself. But now I really have focused a lot, particularly in the last year, on sitting in that space of vulnerability if I feel it, and not having to correct it or push myself out of it. And so the way that I deal with my intuition now is to tune into myself. If the room won't allow me to share what is on offer, for whatever reason, you know, whether it's a personal reason, whether it's a, you know, that whatever the agenda is, then I'll hold steady until the opportunity arises, or I will offer something and wait to see if anyone picks up the thread.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. So you touched on two very important things here. You obviously touched on vulnerability, you touched on emotions, and really leaning into that. But the other thing that I would like to dive a little bit deeper in is because right now, as we're recording this, I know it won't go live until 2025, but right now, as we're recording this, it's still 2024. We had some massive shifts this year, and obviously there are so many people that are walking this world, that are working in corporate environments, that have gifts similar to those that you have, where they're able to feel energies, where they're able to bring that into the work environment, into the corporate environment. Now that the world is going to be more open to having those conversations, how would you propose to someone to navigate that as they're starting to experiment with bringing that into the corporate world?
That's a really good question. The first thing I think, the most fundamental thing is being aligned within themselves, because you can't do that if you're not truly connected to who you are and what you think and feel. So you have to give yourself space. There's no other way to do it, I don't believe. The more adept, the more adept you become at it, the faster you can be in your own center. But you can't just keep being a doer and running all the time and not give yourself space and still be able to do that. You just can't. I've never met anyone who can. So obviously the better the more you practice and the faster, like I can clear myself really fast, I can anchor myself really fast, I can do it while I'm talking, I can do it while I'm walking, I can do all of that. But it's taking a lot of practice. People's energies are accelerating, the earth plane energetics are accelerating. They will get there faster than I got there 20 years ago because the energetics on the earth are different. However, it's still vital that that's in place before they start shifting into that framework in a boardroom meeting or in a business environment. So the first thing, I guess, once they've got that anchoring and being clear about what they know is true for them, and that they're tuning into what they're feeling and what they're perceiving in any given moment. Once they're experiencing something like that in a meeting or in the journey of their day-to-day business life, and they get an intuition about something, then the first thing is to drop into the space of being neutral. Because once you're neutral and you're not attached to the outcome of it, you'll start to see, it's like being an observer. You observe everyone in the room, you observe the dynamics, you observe the conversation, you observe yourself, you observe the whole environment. And if you're repeatedly getting a message, there's a message to be shared. And so I would say then you trust your intuition and you start to share whatever the content is of that dialogue. If it's something that you're not sure about or not confident about, then I would wait and sit with it later. And if it still resonates for you, then, you can always send an email later. You can always enter a conversation later and say, look, I had a feeling about something when we were in that meeting and I didn't voice it, but this is what I think needs to be done or said or followed. And it gives the opportunity for another level of discussion. I find I'm much more open about that stuff now. And it's because I'm quite comfortable in my own skin with talking about it now. So I'll actually openly say the energy shifted in the room at this point. The energy shifted when someone said this. So-and-so did this and it didn't resonate because it doesn't feel like it's anchored or it doesn't feel like it's truthful or whatever. So I will use the language of heart-centered conversation or intuitive-centered conversation rather than shifting it into an intellectual evaluation or analysis. Because as soon as you shift it into intellect, not only does it open you up for a degree of judgment if someone perceives it differently, but also it undermines your own intuition and it undermines your own awareness. And if you've got that awareness because you're looking at a bigger picture, it should be shared from a bigger picture, I believe.
And that's obviously so huge considering that you work in such data-driven environments. I mean, quality and safety, architecture, interior design, there is so much mathematics and there is so much behind it, physics and everything. And then to tap into spirituality and being able to also use language that is quite spiritual language and bring that into a corporate environment. I think a lot of people are still somewhat scared of it. They're still kind of living in a closet and they're trying to figure out, well, how do I incorporate those gifts? Because as we know, once you discover a gift within yourself, the universe doesn't get quieter, the universe only gets louder. And at some stage, you can't do anything but to honor the core and integrate it. And I think, to have leaders like yourself who had such incredible careers already, to be a guiding light and to share this on this podcast is so incredibly important because it just gives other people the permission to start honoring that within themselves and to start making the shifts into more heart-centered corporations, which is so needed. I mean, we've already seen so many corporations crumble. It's definitely the age of Aquarius that we're now experiencing, and that old age and the old structures are falling apart when it's not in alignment. So it's just really interesting, all the shifts that we're currently seeing. And I think you have already shared with me that obviously the shifts in 2025 are even going to be more profound, and we're going to experience the acceleration even more on that energetic plane. I mean, we see it visually whenever there is an aurora that is so visible across continents where you don't usually see auroras. That's now starting for the energy to become visible. What's sort of your take on what we're going to experience in 2025 when it comes to the corporate landscape in particular?
I think it's going to be really interesting because, the whole energetic at the moment, and particularly through to February, I see is really rocking the foundations of many people. And, corporations are run by people. And so the reality is they're started by a person. And, if there's a business owner still involved or the, managing director, CEO or whoever, and all the leaders involved at all the different layers are going to be challenged because the whole frequency of the earth, the whole electromagnetic field has been shifting for quite some time. And as that as the grid changes and opens up, it gives space for people to be able to shift their consciousness and to shift their old patterns. So by doing that, what it does is challenge the old frameworks. So any of the old expectations that businesses used to have, the old ways they used to trade, the old formulas they had, a lot of them are not going to actually hold up anymore. And so there's going to be a lot of challenge as we go through. It's really started in November, December, January, February. It's going to keep going, chopping through that time, so that people are going to be challenged as to whether or not what they're doing is right for them, whether they want to stay on this course of whatever they're doing. And as they are challenged by that, it's going to break a lot of the threads of the old corporate framework. Now, some organizations are so big and so cumbersome, it's a bit like moving the Titanic. And sometimes there'll be cataclysmic change because they can't actually redirect. They can't redirect. Their structures are so rigid, they can't redirect. So they're going to have fundamental fragmenting. So it means that there may be significant shifts either financially or from a legal standpoint or from a social standpoint that mean they can't actually do it in the old way. So that gives the opportunity for a whole new energetic to rise. There's also, thousands and hundreds of thousands of people that have questioned the old formula of the way they work since COVID. COVID was stirring the pot, So what do you really want? Why are you doing this 9-to-5 job? All that sort of stuff, looking for purpose, looking for meaning, choosing a pathway for their life. And so all of that is feeding into this uncertainty and the energetic changes. So I think there's going to be a lot of rumbling as we go through until February. And I actually think it's really fabulous because it doesn't matter where I go, I keep hearing individuals talk about the shifts and changes that they're experiencing within themselves, whether they would call themselves spiritual or not. And they're looking at new ways to do business. They're looking at new ways to support themselves. They're looking at new ways to support their families. They're looking at new ways to feel satisfaction. They're looking at the frustration they feel from the previous way they've done business. So it's happening at all levels, from young people all the way through to people who are, heading towards retirement. So that shift alone is making people reevaluate how they want to do business. And so that groundswell is happening at such a rate now that it's fundamentally changing the way we do business. The number of CEOs or executives you talk to about the frustration they've had of trying to deal with people working from home, people who work from home finding it frustrating because they have no sense of community. All that stuff is just shifting and changing the cultural landscape in a work environment. So I think that turbulence is going to continue into the first part of the year. I think it'll stabilize a bit in March, and it'll give us a really good opportunity to find a new footing. And I think those people who are ready to make those big shifts are going to be making them in, if they haven't already, or they'll be well and truly on their way, and they're going to be stirring up their life, their commitment, their direction. And it's a fabulous time for all of them because, that's the time to really look at what they truly want and own it. So that will be shaking up, and then they'll get their feet in March, and that will give them a bit of a sense of groundedness. And so as the landscape is changing, I feel like there's these new support structures are going to rise around them. So these are energetic support structures, things that you don't see in the tangible world necessarily. So for those people who like to talk about spirit beings and, energies that are maybe not visible to many people, those energies will rise to support those who are willing to make this shift and commitment to themselves. And as they come to the fore and they make more and more choices in alignment with their truth, what will happen is they'll move gradually into flow. There'll be hiccups because they'll be challenged. It's just life. And so as they get challenged and they recommit to their own journey and they recommit to the fact that they're going to honor themselves and honor the planet, they'll get more and more support, and their ability to escalate in their chosen field is out of this world. It's just so exponentially bigger than they can even imagine that I can't even give you a scale. Wow. So, people just thinking that they're making a small choice by changing business from one business to another because it's more in alignment. It's a small, relatively small choice, but it has massive consequences. The ability for them to unpack and unfold and grow in that new arena is so fabulous. It's so enormous that I literally can't even explain the scale, because they have no concept of what will come. They have no concept of how supported they will be, how the universe is changing, how as they elevate, they'll bring everybody around them with them. So there's enormous opportunity coming in 2025, and that will go through waves again in the middle of the year where there'll be opportunities to challenge our societal structure, our business structure, our family structures, and really get us to refine our view of the world and get us to refine our view of ourselves and how we engage with others. And there'll be a big challenge on forgiveness. Are we willing to let go of the old crap that we've held on to for ages because we want to blame someone else for the inadequacies of our life? We're really going to be pushed in the middle of the year to challenge us. Are you going to let go of that stuff so that you can actually be fully in your power? Or are you going to stay in a position of more aligned to a victimhood mentality and really, limit yourself? Or are you going to grow? And if you're going to grow, what do you need to do to grow? So it's such a passion-empowered transition that I think it's so, from the outside, I look at it and I get excited for people because I think, how good is it that they can make this transition so easily? The generations before us had to work really hard at making energy shifts. Even 20, 30, 40 years ago, we had to work hard at making energy shifts. We had to do a lot of work. Now it's just coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And so all people have to do is be committed within themselves, honor the truth of who they are, and the universe and the environment in which they are in will bring the opportunities for growth. And all they have to do is ride that wave. And it's easy for me to say, all they got to do is ride that wave. I know that's not always easy, but the opportunity in this year is profound because there's going to be another upswing after the challenges of, the middle of the year. There's going to be another upswing in the, around September-ish, which will give them like another ride, another high wave for them to capture and catapult forward. That will mean that they can start to really launch new things, new products, new ways of doing things. So I just see it as an amazing opportunity for them to really step into their power and honor who they are.
Yeah. So I guess this could either go two ways. You could either be kicking and screaming and resisting whatever is coming up internally, or you could just have that trust in the unseen, in the unknown, and kind of jump off that cliff and know that you are supported and that you are held, and that whatever comes internally within you, whatever feels so strong and so aligned and just doesn't go away, we just need to kind of go with it. And, on the spiritual journey that I have been on, one of the things that I sometimes struggle with is just having that faith and having that trust. And I know how powerful, obviously, the language is that we use with ourselves, the thoughts that we have when it comes to manifestation, because, law of attraction and law of vibration, it's all there. And if we have the negative thoughts, then the negative experiences manifest in the world. And if we have the positive thoughts and we take aligned action, then the positive things end up happening to us in our 3D reality. And so for me, it's always just trying to center myself back and knowing that we are supported, that we are held as long as we're in integrity, in an authenticity. And obviously that's where all the work comes in. And whether it is, journaling, or whether it is meditation, whatever form that the individual use to ground themselves, to open up the ability to listen, to feel what is coming in, what is truth, what needs shifting. And as you say, that, can sometimes be hard, letting go of things, letting go of people. That is all easier said than done in the reality. But it's either we're resisting and kicking and screaming, or we're just going with the flow and see where all of this leads us.
And I think sometimes it's a bit of both.
Yes.
Because we all go through stages where we resist it. And the more energy we put into something that is not in our best interest, the more likely we are to hang on to it. So, we do have to be kind to ourselves and recognize that sometimes, we're fighting ourselves for whatever reason. And, we may have built whole frameworks around justifying those beliefs or those patterns. And, that willingness to be vulnerable and to actually recognize when something is not serving us, and just be okay with that and sit in that and go, And I think the other thing for me that is a really key element of this is accepting that often there'll be people who judge you, because someone once said to me, people will always judge you, right? So if you can let go of the fear of being judged and just allow yourself to honor yourself, because ultimately, if you sway your direction because of fear of being judged, what you're doing is you're swaying yourself away from your own center. And so accepting that people are going to judge you, accepting that no matter how beautiful or good or, radiant you are, there'll be people who will be negative. And so this is where boundaries, and this is where honoring your no is really critical, because that is what gives you your foundation to be able to stand in your power in terms of choosing what you want and being okay with sharing that, and people will judge. I mean, I know when I open my mouth in a corporate environment and I'm talking about energy, and I know there's going to be someone in the room that wants to shut that down.
Yeah.
And so, but I've just got to a point where I think, well, if not now, when? And the reality is there's so much opportunity for us to do that now, for us to hold true. And there's enough people out there that are willing, that if we don't do it now, we don't give the platform for everyone else to step up.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the logical brain obviously always tries to put an ROI on things, or says, well, how do we quantify it? How do we justify it? How do we know that the spiritual stuff is working? And sometimes we just don't know that just yet. We just know it in the years to come when we have a look at, how the course of a company could have gone if we didn't have that intuitive nudge, if we didn't get some sort of insights on not to sign the contract or to go into partnership with a particular company. It's all those things. It's like, well, we just need to trust and rely on the people that have that connection to spirit. If they're centered, if they are in integrity, then obviously what they're sensing is going to come from that grounded place. And sometimes that's all we can do for the moment. And the logical brain just sometimes has to jump to the side and be occupied with something else. Yeah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I know when I first started talking to people years ago about wanting to work with leaders, and, I don't have an MBA, and a number of people who said to me, oh, that you're not going to be able to do that. You're not going to be able to do that. You won't be able to do meditation with leaders. No one's going to be interested, blah, 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 blah. And I use guided meditation as a vehicle to do energy work with, the business leaders and the entrepreneurs that I work with, because it uses their own creativity. They step into their own energetic. And that's what I want. It's not my energy, it's their energy that they have to connect to. And so I use that as a tool when I'm working with them. And the number of people who really kind of just said, no, it's not going to work, and weren't interested, wouldn't participate. Even close friends of mine who have known about my ability for a long time. And I look back now, and I was only thinking the other day about, it started as a whisper back there, and now there's a groundswell. And you go, wow, if only I would have known that back there, and you would never give up. And I didn't give up. I just kept holding a space for it. And the space then unfolds at a certain point in time when all the things align, and all your skills and all your ability and all your experience comes together, irrespective of your age, irrespective of your, background. It all comes together to elevate you in just the right time and in just the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've already had the absolute pleasure to have you here in our new office space in Glenelg, where you've already done some energy clearing, you've already done a little bit of redirection, and we know that we're obviously going to do a lot more work with you in that space, because at the end of the day, we all want to make an impact. We're all heart-centered leaders. We all want to create a ripple effect. And if we can make it a little bit easier for ourselves by doing some of the ground and energy work with the people that are gifted, just as yourself, then why wouldn't we? To me, it just makes total sense. And I'm really fortunate that the people that are sitting in this building feel exactly the same way about it. And Stephen and the other leaders here are very open to talking about it. Some of them don't understand it, and that's okay, but at least they're willing to listen, they're willing to give everything a go, and that's what's really great about those shifts that have been occurring over the last couple of years. So I can't wait to see where all of that is going for you. For yourself, have you got an inkling as to what you're going to do in this world in 2025? Because you have so much to offer.
It's really interesting. I know that there's a lot of things that are going to unfold that I don't know yet. That's
Yeah.
the one thing I do know. But yes, I'm working or starting a new program with an entrepreneur that I work with called Christian Lavolsi, and he and I are starting a program for business leaders, and that will start at the beginning of the year. So that's a mixture of purpose focused thoughts, lessons, sharings, and that's linking to mindset and meditation. So I will be doing the meditation aspect of that and the energy work aspect of that. We'll be meeting twice a week. They're short sessions so that business leaders are not tied up for too long, but it gives them an opportunity to twice a week to ground, to anchor, to do exactly what we've just talked about, resonate in their own energy system so that they're really strong, they're really clear. And as they go into their business life, they can take that with them. It also anchors into their personal life because the reality is our businesses are a byproduct of where we're at personally and
Yeah.
energetically. So there's that starting to unfold. I know that there's a couple of programs I'm going to be writing. I'm in the journey of writing at the moment, and that's opening up space for people to connect in another way to various aspects of themselves. One of the things that I'm quite passionate about is helping people really find a way, a method that they can tune in quickly and easily for their deeper wisdom. Because you don't want to always go outside of yourself to get that information. And in fact, the more you're able to do it within, the faster you will accelerate, the faster you will expand your energy, the faster you will reach the community that you want to reach. And so that nervousness that so many people have had about not stepping into their power, for me, I feel like that's what I'm unraveling this year.
Perfect.
I'm giving them their own connection to their own internal wisdom so they can unravel all of the threads that have kept them limited and stop them from actually expanding fully into their power. Because as they step into that incredible knowledge and wisdom within, their ability to expand and flourish and grow just amplifies. And as
Wow.
I'm saying that, I've got goosebumps all over me. So,
Well, I've had
so
multiple goosebumps. I've had multiple waves of goosebumps going all over my body during this conversation. So we're definitely on the right track with all of it.
so that's really great. And I'm also going to actually be working with teenagers again. I've worked with teenagers. I do teach a yoga class, but I'm particularly interested in helping teenagers tap into this really deep knowing within them because I feel very strongly that so many of the kids are losing their way because they don't have the tools energetically to manage the breadth of energies that are out there. They come in, they've got fine frequencies and they don't know how to deal with it. And then they're subjected to bad behavior by other people, like bullying. And that bullying comes because the bully has fine frequency and they don't know how to deal with life, or they're dealing with that as a result of their own trauma. So I'm really interested in seeing how we can shift that with teenagers. So whilst there's a significant portion of my work is in leadership, for me, I'm interested in elevating teenage leaders so that they can start to shift and they can really start to make a difference, so that this notion of teenage suicide and parents living in constant fear because their kids are subjected to these varying frequencies, whether that's through social media or whether that's face to face, that these kids can't handle, giving them some tools and helping parents understand that the things that they think are freaky, well, this energy work is not freaky. It's the tools the kids need at the moment. And the trouble is you've got to try and get through to the parents. And so the more we do this with the leaders, the more leaders start to open up into it in their businesses, the more parents start to see that it's a natural way of unfolding, the easier it is. So then parents don't feel nervous that you're going to fill their kids' minds with oomy goomy that is not going to help them.
Yeah.
The reality is it's got to be grounded. They've got to be grounded. They've got to find their own way. So it's exactly the same for leaders in corporations as it is for, teenagers living a teenage life, is connecting to who they are. And so part of my journey this year will be working with teens, and that will just interweave around the leadership stuff I'm doing. And I know there's something else and there's other things in there, and I'm just going to wait and see what unfolds.
This is
I'll
sort of
create the programs.
the anticipation.
Yeah, I'll create the programs I'm creating, and I'll keep working with my clients one-on-one as I do, and in groups as I do. And then allow that to unravel in whatever direction it needs to unravel. I can feel people answering the call, all around the globe. There are
Yeah.
energy workers, there are people like yourself all around the globe doing this work to elevate humanity. And it's time. People don't want to stay in that old horrible energy anymore. And the ones that are determined to stay in it will at some point go a separate way.
Yes, exactly. That's the forecast at least. Yeah. Wow. There is so much in that, and I'm so honored to obviously have you on, because I know the work that you're going to be doing moving forward is going to be incredible. It's going to change so many people's lives. It's exactly what you said. We just need the lighthouses that are ready to step up, that are ready to shine the light and say, okay, well, if you're looking for someone and if you're looking for help, here I am, I can help you. And this is obviously also the beauty about the technology that we have these days. We have the ability to create content and courses and material that we can spread so much further than what we have been able to do in the past. Obviously, with artificial intelligence coming in as well, there is a whole speeding up in, spreading news or writing newsletters or whichever way we can help ourselves, because at the end of the day, many of us are N equal one, and many of us don't always have the ability to work with contractors and get external help. And so I'm just, trying to use this tool of a podcast to create this ripple effect, to share you with my community, and then vice versa moving forward, so that we can just spread everything a lot quicker, and the resources that we are going to develop a lot quicker as well. So in the show notes, we're going to obviously put your email address or your website, your socials, whatever you would like to share with our audience. When it comes to grounding, because I know that grounding is probably one of the biggest tools that exists right now, where you can make the fastest changes. Just before we wrap up, any advice on quick grounding for any type of situation?
Yeah. Happy to share that. The first thing I want to say about grounding is that the more you expand your frequency, the more critical grounding is. So the more rapid you become and accelerating yourself, the more vital understanding grounding is. And the more you do it, the more you can expand. So that's the first thing. So yes, so there's multiple ways you can ground. And I like to say it depends on the type of person you are, firstly. If at the moment the person is very active and they're not good at sitting still, I wouldn't even say sit in meditation. I wouldn't even go there. So start doing it through a moving practice, so that one of the most simple ways is you can take your heart energy and you can just anchor it into the core of the earth, right into the center where the energy of the earth is clear. Imagine almost like a root growing down into the ground, and that beautiful earth energy will come up and just cradle people and support them. So that's the first. You can visualize it. You can just set your intention. You can just ask that it happens. So you can do that in a very simple way. You can sit and do it. But if you're a moving monkey and you find it hard to sit, then do it while you're walking, do it while you're running. Set your intention to anchor deep into the core of the earth. The other simple things are, going for a swim in the ocean, salt water will ground, sitting with your back against a tree, making sure you eat properly. So eat in a stable way, not real highs and real lows. So the fourth way, which I quite like, is having a bath. And I usually, when I have a bath, I do a mixture of grounding and clearing. So I'll use a combination of Epsom salts and silica, actually, liquid silica. And liquid silica, which is meant to be good for nails and skin, but it actually helps ground and it helps clear, and it shifts the crystalline structure of your body into its natural matrix. So it's a really good way to, particularly if you had a lot of stuff going on, particularly a lot of head stuff, and that will enable you to both clear and to ground. So I also use Aurosoma products. So I love them. They have red is the grounding frequency. So they have beautiful products in pomandas and quintessences that I use a lot. I use them with all my, you probably see them behind me with the white lids. I use them with all my clients. I use them in all my yoga classes. They have expanding frequencies and they have grounding frequencies. So you can use a product too. But if you don't have any of that, lie on the ground. Lie on the ground, get on the grass, lean against a tree,
Yeah.
connect to nature.
It comes back to the very simple things that we used to do back in the day that we don't take the time for anymore. And I know that obviously, when I get busy, when I get frustrated with the world, the first thing that goes out of the window is my well-being practices. It's my grounding practices. But obviously that is so critically important. And the one thing that I always like to share as well is if you had a particularly heavy day, and if you're a projector or if you're an empath, then showers at night are an absolute secret. Obviously not anymore now, but no, really a good practice to just ground yourself, wash all the energies off, and just visualize how that water is going to wash everything off your body, your auric body, your energetic body into the ground, and so that you can have a better night's sleep and get more rest for the next day.
Yeah. So for me, I think grounding practices are inherently connected to clearing practices too. So, there's other ways you can do it, but setting your intention to clear, like you said, clear off your energy at the end of the day and anchor yourself to the earth. Yeah.
Wow, good. Anything, last words of wisdom that you would like to share with our listeners before we wrap up?
I think the most important thing is to learn self-trust, because there's so much changing around us. Our whole energetic framework on the planet is changing. And so the central alignment comes from within. And so if we try and do it outside of ourselves all the time, you'll always find that there's a different point to attach to. So people have to work out what that connection is to themselves, because otherwise they'll feel pulled from pillar to post and it'll be really hard for them to anchor.
Yeah.
So really connect, get used to what you like, what you don't like, get used to listening to the voice within, work out what's fun for you. Sometimes people have no idea anymore.
Well, that's part of the reason why I do the work that I do, because people lack the clarity of what it is that they want in life. And I was there myself a couple of years ago. So it is not that uncommon. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's great. And the work that you do just really helps people, I think, find it quickly, connect quickly to, that often that voice that they've had in the back of their head, but there's a degree of uncertainty to it. When they see the framework that, that you talk them through and that Human Design provides them with, it gives them the opportunity to develop a level of confidence within themselves at what they're hearing.
Yeah.
And then that next level is, okay, I get who I am. Now I can play with it, and it gives such a commitment to themselves that they can really start to open up. And I think, the biggest commitment anyone can make in this next year is actually a commitment to listening to themselves and choosing to grow, because in doing that, the rest will just come.
And that just gave me another set of tingles. And I think that is the perfect way to close off this beautiful episode. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for bringing your beautiful energy to today. And I can't wait to see what's going to unfold for you. And I'm sure it's not going to be the last time that you have been on this podcast. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
Thank you so much for being here and doing what you do. It's great. And I'm very happy to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you.